Months passed since Daniel Harper's return to Earth, and though he tried to settle back into his old routine, nothing felt quite the same. The library where he worked seemed smaller now, its familiar aisles lacking the grandeur of Zorathia's towering spires. Even the smell of books, once comforting, couldn't compare to the metallic tang of alien technology or the fresh scent of Zorathian gardens. At night, Daniel often found himself staring out his apartment window, gazing at the stars and wondering how the princesses were doing. On Earth, life moved forward as usual. News outlets occasionally reported updates about Zorathia, highlighting the diplomatic efforts between the two worlds. Humanity was fascinated by the advanced civilization that had once dismissed them as primitive. Scientists eagerly studied samples of Zorathian technology, while politicians debated the implications of interstellar alliances. For most people, it was an exciting new chapter in human history, but for Daniel, it was personal. One evening, as he sat on his couch flipping through channels, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Curious, he answered. "Hello? Daniel?" a soft voice asked. It took him a moment to recognize it, but when he did, his heart skipped a beat. "Nessa, is that you?" "Yes," she replied, her tone tinged with nervous excitement. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "No, not at all," Daniel said quickly. "How are you? How is everyone?" "There?" "Adjusting," Nessa admitted. "Things are better here, thanks to what you taught us. But we miss you, all of us do." Daniel smiled faintly, warmth spreading through his chest. "I miss you, too, every day." There was a pause, and then Nessa spoke again, her voice more hesitant. "We've been working on a project inspired by your vision of unity between our worlds. We'd like you to see it." "What kind of project?" Daniel asked, intrigued. "A cultural exchange program," Nessa explained. "It's designed to bring humans and Zorathians closer together through art, science, education, everything. We think it could change both our societies for the better." "That sounds incredible," Daniel said honestly. "But why call me now?" "Because we want you to be part of it," Nessa replied. "Not just as an observer, but as a leader. You've already proven you can bridge gaps no one else thought possible. Please, come back, even if it's just for a visit." Daniel hesitated, torn between the life he knew and the one he'd left behind. "Let me think about it," he said finally. "I'll need some time." After hanging up, Daniel spent hours pacing his apartment, weighing his options. Returning to Zorathia meant stepping back into a role he wasn't sure he was ready for again. Yet staying on Earth felt like turning his back on something bigger than himself. By morning, he'd made up his mind. When Daniel arrived on Zorathia, he was greeted with open arms, or rather, glowing smiles and warm embraces from the princesses. Illyria shook his hand firmly, her expression softer than before. Silva handed him a tablet filled with data about the exchange program, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. Kira gave him a playful punch on the shoulder, teasing him about being late. And Nessa hugged him tightly, tears shimmering in her eyes. "You came back," she whispered. "I couldn't stay away," Daniel admitted, returning her embrace. Over the next few days, Daniel immersed himself in the project, amazed by how much the princesses had accomplished in his absence. They had built partnerships with universities, museums, and research institutions across Earth, creating opportunities for collaboration unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Artists from both worlds shared techniques, scientists exchanged ideas, and students participated in joint programs that broadened their horizons. The highlight of the initiative was the construction of a massive space station orbiting between Earth and Zorathia. Named Unity, it served as a hub for cultural interaction, equipped with classrooms, laboratories, and exhibition halls. During its inauguration ceremony, Daniel stood alongside the princesses, addressing a crowd of dignitaries and citizens from both planets. "This isn't just a building," Daniel said, his voice steady and clear. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we set aside differences and work together. Earth and Zorothea may be light years apart, but our hearts share the same sky. His words earned thunderous applause, and for the first time in months, Daniel felt truly at peace. He belonged not just to Earth or Zorothea, but to the growing connection between them. As weeks turned into months, Daniel split his time between the two worlds, acting as a liaison for the exchange program. On Earth, he inspired young minds to dream beyond their planet's boundaries. On Zorothea, he continued advising the princesses, who had grown into capable leaders under his influence. Their bond with him deepened, especially Nessa's. One quiet evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Nessa stopped and turned to face him. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she spoke. "Daniel, there's something I wanted to tell you for a long time." "What is it?" he asked gently. "I love you," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I know it might sound impossible with everything that divides us, but my feelings won't change. Not now, not ever." Daniel stared at her, overwhelmed by emotion. He had suspected her feelings for him, but never dared to believe they were mutual. "Nessa," he began, taking her hands in his, "I love you too, more than I can say." They kissed beneath the stars, their connection transcending galaxies. Though their relationship would face challenges, distance, politics, and societal expectations, they were determined to make it work. Love, they realized, was the ultimate bridge. Between worlds. In the years that followed, Daniel became a legend on both Earth and Zorothea. His story inspired countless others to reach across divides and build bridges of understanding. The princesses ruled wisely, guided by the lessons he had taught them. And though Daniel eventually returned to Earth permanently, his legacy lived on in the bonds he had forged. Every so often, Nessa would send him messages via hologram, updating him on Zorothea's progress and reminding him of her love. Sometimes, during quiet nights, Daniel would step outside and look up at the stars, knowing she was doing the same. Together, they had proven that even the most unlikely connections could alter destinies, and that love, like courage, knew no bounds. The aftermath of the battle left Zorothea scarred but alive, its people united in a way they hadn't been before. The princesses, once divided by pride and rivalry, now stood shoulder to shoulder, their shared victory forging bonds that no amount of bickering could break. Daniel Harper watched as they worked tirelessly to rebuild their kingdom. Their newfound teamwork a testament to how far they'd come since his arrival. In the weeks following the invasion, Illyria took charge of restoring diplomatic relations with neighboring planets. She had always been the face of Zorothea's authority, but now her speeches carried genuine warmth instead of cold arrogance. "We owe our survival to those who stood with us," she said during a ceremony honoring the Allied fleets. Her words resonated deeply, earning applause from both citizens and foreign dignitaries alike. Silva threw herself into improving Zorothea's defenses, determined to ensure such an attack would never happen again. With Daniel's encouragement, she expanded her research beyond military applications, developing technologies that improved daily life for the people. Energy disruptors were repurposed to power cities more efficiently, and her innovations earned her widespread admiration, not just as a brilliant scientist, but as someone who cared about her planet's future. Kira focused on training a new generation of soldiers, instilling in them not only discipline, but also compassion. "Strength isn't just about fighting," she told her recruits during drills. "It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves." Her philosophy marked a shift in Zorothea's military culture, one that emphasized honor over aggression. Nessa continued her humanitarian efforts, traveling across the planet to assist communities still recovering from the devastation. She visited schools, hospitals, and shelters, listening to the needs of ordinary citizens and advocating for their voices to be heard in the royal court. When she returned to the palace each evening, Daniel often joined her on the balcony, where they shared quiet conversations under the stars. "Do you think we'll ever go back to how things were?" Nessa asked one night, her voice tinged with sadness. Daniel shook his head. No, and maybe that's a good thing. You've all grown so much. This tragedy brought out the best in you. She smiled faintly. And in you too. I don't think any of us realized what you were capable of when Father chose you. He chuckled softly. I didn't either. Honestly, I'm still figuring it out. Despite their progress, challenges remained. Some members of the Royal Council questioned whether Daniel's influence was permanent or merely temporary. Others whispered about Earth, wondering if humanity posed a threat or an opportunity for Zorothea. These murmurs reached Daniel's ears, but he chose not to dwell on them. Instead, he focused on helping the princesses navigate their responsibilities. While preparing himself for the inevitable moment when his role would end, that moment came sooner than expected. One morning, Chancellor Renner summoned Daniel to the throne room. The elderly advisor looked unusually solemn as he handed over a sealed envelope bearing the royal insignia. This is from your world, Renner explained. A message arrived last night via interstellar communication. Daniel opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter from Earth's Global Council, informing him that his extended absence had raised concerns among global leaders. They urged him to return home immediately to address questions about his involvement with Zorothea. The tone of the letter was polite but firm, leaving little room for negotiation. I have to leave, Daniel told the princesses later that day, his voice heavy with regret. Earth needs me back. The news hit hard. Illyria masked her emotions behind a stoic expression, though her clenched fist betrayed her unease. Silva adjusted her glasses repeatedly, avoiding eye contact. Kira paced the room, muttering under her breath about unfair timing. Only Nessa allowed herself to cry openly, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clung to Daniel. You can't go, she pleaded. Not now, not after everything. I don't want to leave, Daniel admitted, pulling her into a gentle embrace. But I have responsibilities there, just like you do here. Besides, my work here is done. You don't need me anymore. That's not true, Nessa insisted. You're part of us now. Her sisters exchanged glances, silently agreeing with her sentiment. Finally, Illyria stepped forward, her usual confidence faltering. She's right. You've changed us for the better. We may not have understood Father's decision at first, but now we see why he trusted you. Silva nodded. You taught us humility, unity, and strength. We won't forget that. Kira crossed her arms, her voice gruff but sincere. If you ever need help, call on us. Zorothea owes you a debt we can never repay. Daniel felt a lump rise in his throat. Thank you, he managed to say. All of you, I'll miss you too. Before departing, Daniel addressed the royal court one final time. Standing before a sea of faces, he spoke from the heart. When I first arrived on Zorothea, I thought I was completely out of place. But, over time, I learned something important. Greatness isn't about where you come from. It's about what you do. Earth has much to offer, just as Zorothea does. Together, our worlds can achieve incredible things. His words sparked murmurs of agreement throughout the chamber. Inspired by his speech, the council agreed to establish formal diplomatic ties with Earth, paving the way for collaboration between the two civilizations. As Daniel boarded the starship that would take him home, he glanced back at the palace. One last time. The princesses stood on the steps, waving goodbye, their unity shining brighter than ever. Back on Earth, Daniel resumed his quiet life, though it was forever changed by his experiences. He often found himself gazing at the stars, remembering the extraordinary journey that had transformed him from a humble librarian into a leader among aliens. Though he missed Zorothea, especially Nessa, he knew he had made a difference, a legacy that spanned galaxies. Meanwhile, on Zorothea, the princesses implemented reforms inspired by Daniel's teachings. Illyria promoted inclusivity within the government, ensuring diverse voices were represented. Silva spearheaded projects aimed at sharing knowledge with less advanced planets. including Earth. Kira redefined the military's mission to focus on peacekeeping rather than conquest. And Nessa kept hope alive, secretly wishing that one day Daniel might return to bridge the gap between their worlds. For now, the bond between human and alien remained strong, proof that even the most unlikely connections could alter destinies across the cosmos. The fragile peace Daniel had helped build among the princesses was shattered one fateful morning, when alarms blared throughout the palace. Servants rushed through the halls, their faces pale with fear, while guards scrambled to secure the perimeter. Daniel hurried to the war room, where the princesses and Chancellor Renner were already gathered, their expressions grim. "What's happening?" Daniel asked. His heart pounding. Chancellor Renner gestured to a holographic display hovering in the center of the room. It showed a massive fleet of ships approaching Zorathia, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. "Warlord Valen," Renner explained, his voice heavy with dread. "He leads the Obsidian Empire, a ruthless coalition that seeks to conquer weaker planets. They've come for our resources and our technology." Illyria clenched her fists, her usual composure cracking. "How did they find us? Our defenses should have detected them long before now." "They must have used cloaking technology," Silva muttered, analyzing the data on her glowing glasses. "This is bad, very bad." Kira slammed her hand against the table. "We can't let them take Zorathia. We fight!" Nessa looked terrified, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of her chair. "But how? Their forces are overwhelming." Daniel stepped forward, his mind racing. Though he had no military experience, he knew panic wouldn't solve anything. "We need a plan," he said firmly. "What are our strengths? What can we use against them?" The princesses exchanged glances, surprised by his calm demeanor. Illyria spoke first, her voice steadier this time. "Our planetary shields are strong, but they won't hold forever. If we can buy enough time, reinforcements from allied planets might arrive." Silva nodded. "I've been working on experimental weaponry energy disruptors that could disable their ships. But it's not ready yet. I'll need at least 12 hours to finalize it." Kira crossed her arms. 12 hours is too long. By then, they'll breach our defenses. We need to strike first." Daniel listened carefully, piecing together their ideas. "Okay," he said. "Here's what we'll do. Illyria, you focus on diplomacy. Reach out to nearby allies and ask for immediate support. Silva, prioritize finishing your weapon. Kira, organize the troops and prepare for ground combat if the enemy lands. Nessa, coordinate with the civilian population to ensure everyone is safe and evacuation plans are in place." "And what about you?" Illyria asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'll stay here and help wherever I'm needed," Daniel replied. "We're a team, remember? Let's work together." For once, none of the princesses argued. They split up, each taking charge of their assigned tasks. Daniel stayed in the war room, assisting Silva as she worked tirelessly to complete her energy disruptors. The device was complex, requiring precise calibration, and though Daniel didn't fully understand the science behind it, he offered moral support and helped gather materials. Meanwhile, Illyria reached out to neighboring planets, using her diplomatic skills to rally support. Her efforts paid off when 2 allied fleets agreed to send reinforcements, though they wouldn't arrive for several hours. Kira trained soldiers relentlessly, pushing them to their limits and preparing them for battle. Under her leadership, the Royal Army became a formidable force, ready to defend their home at all costs. Nessa played a crucial role as well, ensuring that civilians were evacuated to underground bunkers and organizing supplies for those who couldn't leave. She moved through the streets with quiet determination, comforting frightened families and inspiring hope. When Daniel saw her later that evening, her face was streaked with dirt, but her eyes burned with resolve. "You're amazing," he told her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "So are you," she replied softly. "None of this would be possible without you." As the hours ticked by, the tension grew unbearable. The enemy fleet drew closer, their massive ships casting shadows over Zorathia's skies. Finally, just as dawn broke, the attack began. The invaders launched a barrage of missiles targeting the planetary shields. Explosions lit up the horizon, shaking the ground beneath the palace. Inside the war room, the princesses and Daniel watched the chaos unfold, their hearts in their throats. Now or never, Silver declared, activating the energy disruptors. A beam of light shot into the sky, striking the lead ship of the enemy fleet. The vessel shuddered violently before collapsing into flames, sending shockwaves through the rest of the armada. Cheers erupted from the war room, but the celebration was short-lived. Dozens of ships remained, and they retaliated with renewed fury. Kira led the counterattack, commanding squads of soldiers to engage the invaders who attempted to land. The battle raged across the planet's surface, explosions echoing in every direction. Despite being outnumbered, the defenders fought with unmatched determination, inspired by Kira's courage and leadership. Back in the war room, Illyria received word that the Allied fleets were en route, closing in on the enemy from behind. "Hold on!" she shouted into the communication system. "Help is coming." The news boosted morale, giving the defenders the strength to push back against the invaders. Finally, after hours of relentless fighting, the tide turned. The combined forces of Zorathia and its allies overwhelmed the enemy, forcing them to retreat. As the last of the ships disappeared into the distance, cheers erupted across the planet, exhausted but victorious. The princesses returned to the palace, where Daniel greeted them with a proud smile. "You did it," he said. "All of you." Illyria nodded, her expression softer than usual. "We couldn't have done it without you. You kept us focused when we wanted to give up." Silva adjusted her glasses, a rare smile tugging at her lips. "Your strategies made the difference. Thank you." Kira extended her hand, which Daniel shook firmly. "You earned my respect today," she admitted gruffly. "Don't waste it." Nessa hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us," she whispered. "You saved Zorathia." In the days that followed, the kingdom began to recover. The princesses worked side by side, rebuilding what had been destroyed and strengthening their defenses for the future. Through it all, Daniel remained a constant presence, guiding them with wisdom and compassion. Though he was still an outsider, he had earned their trust and their gratitude. One evening, as they stood together on the palace balcony overlooking the repaired city, Illyria spoke up. "Father chose you for a reason," she said quietly. "At first, I thought he was wrong. Now, I see he was right." The other princesses nodded in agreement, their bond stronger than ever. For the first time since his arrival, Daniel felt truly accepted not as a human, but as part of their family. And as he gazed at the stars above, he realized something else. His journey wasn't just about proving himself to the princesses. It was about discovering his own strength, resilience, and capacity to make a difference, even in a galaxy far from home. As days turned into weeks, Daniel Harper began to notice subtle changes in the princesses. Though they still tested him at every turn, their sharp edges seemed to soften just a little. Illyria's cutting remarks became less frequent. Silva started seeking his input on technical matters, and Kira no longer rolled her eyes whenever he entered the room. Even Nessa, who had always been kinder than her sisters, grew more open with him, sharing stories about her childhood and dreams for the future. Slowly but surely, Daniel was breaking through their defenses. One evening, after a long day of meetings and training exercises, Daniel found himself alone with Nessa in the palace gardens. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the lush greenery and sparkling fountains. They sat together on a stone bench, enjoying the peaceful moment away from the chaos of the palace. "Tell me about Earth," Nessa said suddenly, her voice soft and curious. "What's it like?" Daniel smiled, surprised by the question. "It's complicated," he admitted. "Earth isn't perfect. We have wars, poverty, and people who don't get along. But we also have beauty mountains, oceans, forests. And despite our differences, humans find ways to connect, to care for each other. Nessa listened intently, her eyes wide with fascination. You make it sound so alive. Here on Zorathia, everything feels so controlled, so planned. Sometimes, I wonder what it would be like to live somewhere unpredictable. Daniel chuckled. Trust me, unpredictability has its downsides, but it also makes life exciting. You never know what might happen next. Their conversation continued late into the night, touching on topics ranging from Earth's history, too. Personal struggles. Nessa confided in Daniel about feeling overshadowed by her older sisters, always expected to follow their lead. I want to explore the galaxy, to see new worlds and meet new people, she said wistfully. But father thought, I was too young, too fragile. He didn't understand how much I needed freedom. Daniel nodded sympathetically. I think you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for, he said. And maybe one day you'll get the chance to chase those dreams. Nessa smiled, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you, Daniel, for listening, for believing in me. The bond between them deepened that night, though neither spoke of it directly. Daniel realized that Nessa saw him not just as a guardian, but as a friend and perhaps something more. It was a comforting thought, even if he wasn't sure how to navigate such feelings in the middle of everything else. Meanwhile, the other princesses were beginning to notice the growing connection between Daniel and Nessa. Illyria, in particular, grew jealous, interpreting Nessa's fondness for Daniel as a betrayal. You're spending an awful lot of time with him, she snapped one afternoon when Nessa joined Daniel in the library. Don't forget your place. Nessa bristled, standing her ground. My place is wherever I choose it to be, she replied firmly. And Daniel treats me with respect, something I don't always get from you. Illyria narrowed her eyes but said nothing, retreating to sulk in private. Silva, however, approached Daniel later that day with a different perspective. Nessa admires you, she observed, adjusting her glowing glasses. It's rare for her to trust anyone, especially outsiders. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm just trying to help, Daniel said honestly. All of you are struggling, whether you admit it or not. Your father left me here for a reason to guide you, not control you. Silva studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps there's more to you than I first assumed, she admitted. But don't mistake my words for approval. You still have much to prove. Daniel accepted her comment without argument, knowing it was as close to praise as he'd get from her. Over time, he continued building bridges with each sister, learning more about their individual struggles and strengths. Illyria, though stubborn, carried the weight of leadership on her shoulders, desperate to live up to her father's legacy. Silva buried herself in work to avoid confronting her emotions, yet her brilliance shone brightest when she allowed herself to dream. Kira channeled her grief into physical training, using anger as fuel, but beneath her tough exterior lay a longing for purpose beyond battlefields. One day during a strategy session in the war room, tensions flared again. Illyria accused Silva of hoarding resources for her experiments, while Kira shouted about the need for stronger military defenses. Voices rose, tempers boiled, and the meeting descended into chaos. Daniel watched silently, waiting for an opening. To step in, enough, he finally called out, his voice firm enough to silence the room. All eyes turned to him, some surprised, others irritated. Fighting among yourselves won't solve anything, he continued. Your father trusted you to work together to protect Zorathia. If you can't put aside your differences, how will you face real threats? His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, Illyria lowered her gaze, shame flickering across her features. He's right, she muttered. We're acting like children. Silva sighed, rubbing her temples. This isn't easy. Losing father. It's left a hole none of us know how to fill. Kira clenched her fist but nodded reluctantly. We need to focus. For Zorothea. Nessa stepped forward, her voice steady. And for ourselves. We're stronger together than apart. Daniel felt a surge of pride as the princesses exchanged tentative nods, agreeing to try once more. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. That night, as he reflected on the day's events, he realized something important. The princesses weren't just learning from him, he was learning from them too. Over the following weeks, Daniel worked closely with the sisters, helping them channel their talents toward common goals. Illyria took charge of diplomatic efforts, negotiating alliances with neighboring planets to strengthen Zorothea's position. Silva devoted herself to developing advanced technology, inspired by Earth's innovations to create solutions tailored to their needs. Kira trained soldiers and devised defensive strategies, ensuring the kingdom was prepared for any threat. And Nessa focused on humanitarian projects, improving living conditions for Zorothea's citizens and fostering goodwill. Through it all, Daniel remained a steady presence, offering guidance without imposing his will. His humility and patience earned him grudging respect from Illyria, admiration from Silva, and camaraderie from Kira. As for Nessa, their bond continued to grow, blossoming into something neither could ignore. One evening, as they strolled through the gardens under a canopy of stars, Nessa stopped and turned to face Daniel. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she spoke. "I've never met anyone like you," she confessed. "You've changed all of us, and I care about you, Daniel." Her words caught him off guard, stirring emotions he hadn't fully acknowledged. "I care about you too, Nessa," he replied softly. "More than you know." They stood there for a moment, the world around them fading into silence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Daniel knew one thing for certain. He wasn't alone anymore. Together, they and the princesses were finding their way forward, step by step. Daniel Harper woke up early the next morning, determined to face the day with a fresh perspective. He had spent hours thinking about his conversation with Nessa, replaying her words in his mind. She had given him insight into her sister's struggles. And though he knew earning their trust wouldn't happen overnight, he felt more prepared to handle whatever came his way. Still, nothing could have prepared him for what the princesses had planned. Breakfast was served in the grand dining hall, where Daniel found himself seated alone once again. The room was massive, with long tables that could easily accommodate dozens of guests, yet only a single plate of food sat before him. As he ate, he noticed Illyria enter the room, followed by Silva and Kira. They didn't acknowledge him at first, instead whispering among themselves as they took their seats at the far end of the table. Their hushed voices carried a tone of mischief, and Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. Sure enough, later that morning, Daniel was summoned to the royal council chamber. When he arrived, the four princesses were already there, standing alongside Chancellor Renner and several other advisors. Illyria stepped forward, a smug smile playing on her lips. "We've decided to put you to the test," she announced. "If you truly intend to lead us, you'll need to prove your worth." Daniel frowned, unsure of what to expect. "What kind of test?" Silva adjusted her glowing glasses and gestured toward a holographic display hovering in the center of the room. It showed a complex diagram filled with equations and symbols that made Daniel's head spin. "This is a theoretical problem involving energy distribution," she explained. "Solve it within the hour, and we'll consider taking you seriously." Kira folded her arms across her chest and smirked. "Don't worry if you can't figure it out. We don't expect much from someone like you." Nessa hesitated, glancing at her sisters before turning to Daniel. Her expression was apologetic, as though she disagreed with their plan but didn't dare speak up. Daniel swallowed hard, knowing this was a challenge designed to humiliate him. But giving up wasn't. An option. The advisors handed him a tablet loaded with the problem, and Daniel sat down at a nearby desk. At first glance, the equation seemed impossible to decipher, but he reminded himself of something Nessa had said: kindness, patience, and strength. He took a deep breath and focus on breaking the problem into smaller parts. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. Though he lacked advanced knowledge of alien technology, he relied on logic and creativity to piece things together. When the hour was up, Illyria approached him with a triumphant grin, ready to declare victory. But when she saw the solution displayed on the tablet, her smile faltered. How? How did you do this? She demanded, her voice tinged with disbelief. It wasn't easy, Daniel admitted. But I figured it out by simplifying the problem and looking for connections. He glanced at Silva, who was examining the solution with a furrowed brow. I may not know everything about your world, but I'm good at solving puzzles. Silva reluctantly nodded, clearly impressed despite herself. You're smarter than you look, she muttered. But this isn't over. True to her word, the princesses devised another test of public debate in front of the court. Illyria argued fiercely against Daniel, attempting to trap him with tricky questions about Zorthian law and customs. But Daniel countered with thoughtful responses, drawing parallels between Earth's history and Zorthia's traditions. By the end of the session, even some of the skeptical nobles were murmuring approval. Still, the princesses weren't done testing him. That evening, Kira challenged Daniel to a physical duel. If you think brains are enough to earn our respect, think again, she declared, handing him a practice sword. Prove you're strong enough to stand beside us. Daniel gulped nervously. He wasn't a fighter, and Kira's muscular frame suggested she had years of training. But backing down would only reinforce their belief that he was weak. With no other choice, he accepted the challenge. The duel took place in the palace courtyard, surrounded by a crowd of curious onlookers. Kira moved swiftly, striking with precision and power. Daniel barely managed to block her attacks, stumbling backward each time. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, he remembered a strategy he'd seen in old movies, using his opponent's momentum against him. When Kira lunged forward, Daniel sidestepped and pushed her arm, causing her to lose balance. She stumbled, but quickly recovered, glaring at him with newfound respect. You're not completely useless, she admitted grudgingly. But don't get cocky. By the end of the day, Daniel was exhausted but relieved. He had survived 3 tests and earned a sliver of respect from the princesses. Illyria still regarded him with suspicion, but Silva and Kira seemed less hostile. Nessa, meanwhile, offered him a quiet smile as they passed in the hallway later. That night, you're doing better than anyone expected, she said softly. Keep going. Despite the progress, tensions remain high. The princesses continued to bicker among themselves, their rivalry fueled by grief and uncertainty. Illyria accused Silva of undermining her authority during the debate, while Kira grew frustrated with Nessa's growing fondness for Daniel. Each sister struggled to cope with their father's absence in her own way, and their constant fighting created cracks in the foundation of their unity. One night, unable to sleep, Daniel wandered the palace halls. He found Chancellor Renner sitting in a quiet alcove, staring at a portrait of King Vorlon. They remind me so much of him, the Chancellor said wistfully. Strong, proud, and stubborn, but they lack his wisdom. Do you think they'll ever come together? Daniel asked. Renner sighed. It will take time and patience. You've already planted the seeds of change. Keep nurturing them, and perhaps they'll bloom. As Daniel returned to his quarters, he reflected on the challenges ahead. The princesses were difficult, yes, but they weren't beyond redemption. If he could continue proving himself not just as a leader, but as someone who cared, he might be able to help them heal. And maybe, just maybe, they'd learn to see him not as an outsider, but as an ally. Daniel Harper stood in the grand hall of the Zorthian Palace, feeling more out of place than ever. The room was enormous, with high ceilings decorated in gold and silver patterns that shimmered under soft lighting. Around him, servants moved. Quietly, their steps almost silent on the polished marble floor. The air smelled faintly of flowers and something metallic, a scent Daniel couldn't quite identify. Despite the beauty of the surroundings, He felt like an intruder, someone who didn't belong. The four princesses were seated on ornate chairs arranged in a semicircle, their expressions ranging from outright hostility to guarded curiosity. Illyria, the eldest, sat at the center, her posture stiff and regal. Her sharp green eyes scanned Daniel from head to toe, as if trying to find flaws she could exploit later. Silva, seated to her left, leaned back casually, tapping her fingers against the armrest of her chair. She wore glasses that glowed faintly, and Daniel guessed they enhanced her intelligence somehow. Kara, the warrior princess, sat upright, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her gaze was intense, almost challenging, as though daring Daniel to make a wrong move. Nessa, the youngest, sat slightly apart from her sisters, her expression softer and more thoughtful. Chancellor Renner cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Princesses," he began, his voice calm but firm, "this is Daniel Harper, the human chosen by your late father to oversee your guardianship and manage his estate. Please treat him with respect." Illyria raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sly smile. "Respect?" she repeated, her tone dripping with mockery. "Father must have lost his mind before he passed. This creature is nothing more than a primitive barbarian. How can he possibly guide us?" Her words stung, but Daniel forced himself to stay calm. He had expected resistance, though hearing it so bluntly still hurt. Before he could respond, Silva chimed in, adjusting her glowing glasses. "I agree with Illyria. Humans are known for their lack of sophistication. What knowledge could this man possibly possess that would benefit us?" Kira snorted, leaning forward slightly. "If you think we'll bow to some outsider, you're mistaken. If Father wanted to teach us humility, he should have picked someone worthy of the task." Nessa remained silent, watching the exchange with wide eyes. Unlike her sisters, she didn't seem eager to attack Daniel. Instead, she studied him curiously, as though trying to understand why their father had chosen him. Daniel caught her gaze briefly and gave her a small nod, hoping to convey gratitude for her restraint. The Chancellor stepped between Daniel and the princesses, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "Your father's decision was not made lightly," he said. "He believed that placing you under Daniel's care would help you grow as individuals and as leaders. I urge you to give him a chance." Illyria scoffed. "We don't need lessons from anyone, let alone a human. But fine, we'll play along for now. Let's see how long he lasts." She waved her hand dismissively, signaling the end of the conversation. With that, the princesses rose from their seats and walked away, leaving Daniel standing awkwardly in the middle of the hall. Chancellor Renner turned to him, his expression sympathetic. "Don't let their words discourage you," he said gently. "They're grieving their father's loss and struggling to accept his final wishes. Give them time." Daniel nodded, though he wasn't sure how much patience he had left. "What exactly am I supposed to do here?" he asked. "I'm not royalty. I don't even know how to act around people like them." Renner smiled faintly. "You're here to lead by example. Show them kindness, wisdom, and strength. They may resist at first, but they'll come to see the value in what you bring." Over the next few days, Daniel tried to settle into his new role, though every step felt like walking through quicksand. The palace was a maze of corridors and rooms, each more extravagant than the last. Servants avoided making eye contact with him, unsure of how to address someone who was neither royal nor noble. Meals were served in a massive dining hall, where Daniel ate alone while the princesses dined separately. Occasionally, he'd catch glimpses of them from afar, Illyria giving orders to attendants, Silva buried in books or holographic screens, Kira practicing combat moves in a courtyard, and Nessa wandering the gardens, lost in thought. One afternoon, Daniel decided to explore the palace grounds. He needed fresh air and a break from the tension inside. As he wandered through the lush gardens, he came across Nessa sitting on a bench beneath a tree. She looked up as he approached, startled, but not unfriendly. "May I sit here?" Daniel asked hesitantly. She nodded, scooting over slightly to make room. "Of course, it's your palace now, isn't it?" He chuckled nervously. "Not really, I'm just figuring things out." Nessa tilted her head, studying him. "You're different from what I expected," she admitted. "My sisters think you're weak, but I see something else." Daniel blinked, surprised by her honesty. "Something else?" "Yes," she said softly. "Kindness, patience. You haven't lashed out at us, even though we've been cruel. That takes strength." Her words warmed him, and for the first time since arriving, Daniel felt a flicker of hope. Maybe not all the princesses were beyond reach. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I'm just trying to do my best." Nessa smiled faintly. "Maybe we can help each other. My sisters won't admit it, but they're scared. Losing father has left a void, and they don't know how to fill it. If you can show them you're trustworthy, maybe they'll open up." Daniel nodded, grateful for her advice. As they talked, he learned more about the princesses' personalities and struggles. Illyria carried the weight of being the eldest, always expected to be perfect. Silva buried herself in work to avoid emotional pain. Kira channeled her grief into physical training, using anger as fuel. And Nessa, the youngest, often felt overlooked, her gentler nature dismissed as weakness. When Daniel returned to his quarters that evening, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he realized he wasn't completely alone. Nessa's quiet support gave him courage, and he vowed to prove himself not just to the princesses, but to himself. Daniel Harper had always lived a quiet life. He worked as a librarian in a small branch of the Chicago Public Library, where the most exciting part of his day was helping someone find a misplaced book or recommending a novel to a curious reader. At 32, he had no grand ambitions, no dreams of fame or fortune. His world revolved around the familiar streets of his neighborhood, the comforting smell of old paper, and the occasional cup of coffee from the cafe down the block. So when a strange silver drone descended from the sky one crisp autumn afternoon, Daniel could hardly believe what was happening. The drone hovered silently above him as he walked home from work, its sleek metallic surface glinting in the fading sunlight. It emitted a soft hum that seemed to vibrate through the air, drawing the attention of passers-by who stopped to stare. Before Daniel could react, the drone projected a holographic image in front of him, a tall, regal figure with sharp features and piercing eyes. The man wore elaborate robes adorned with intricate patterns, and his voice carried an authority that made Daniel feel both awed and uneasy. "Greetings, Daniel Harper," the figure began, his tone calm but commanding. "I am King Vorlin of Zorathia, ruler of the Galactic Concordance. My time grows short, and I have chosen you to inherit a great responsibility." Daniel blinked, convinced this was some kind of prank. "I'm sorry," he stammered, glancing around at the growing crowd. "Did you say king? And what do you mean, inherit?" The hologram ignored his questions. "You are now the legal guardian of my 4 daughters, Princesses Illyria, Silva, Kira, and Nessa, and the overseer of my estate. A transport vessel will arrive within 24 hours to bring you to Zorathia. Prepare yourself, for your life is about to change forever." With that, the image vanished, leaving Daniel standing in stunned silence. The drone retracted into itself like liquid metal before ascending into the sky and disappearing. For a moment, Daniel wondered if he had imagined the whole thing. But the murmurs of the onlookers confirmed it was real. People were pointing, whispering, and pulling out their phones to record the event. That night, Daniel barely slept. He replayed the encounter over and over in his mind, trying to make sense of it. Why would an alien king choose him of all people? He wasn't special. He didn't even own a passport. Yet something about the message felt undeniable. As dawn broke, he decided to call in sick to work and spent the day researching Zorathia online. To his surprise, there were countless references to the planet scattered across obscure websites and forums dedicated to extraterrestrial life. According to these sources, Zoroastrian was a technologically advanced civilization known for its wealth, culture, and influence throughout the galaxy. Its royal family, particularly the four princesses, were often mentioned in glowing terms, though they were also described as arrogant and dismissive of lesser species, including humans stopped by evening. Daniel's doorbell rang, standing outside. Was a woman dressed in a fitted black uniform, her boots polished to a mirror shine. She introduced herself as Captain Elena Vega, commander of the starship assigned to transport him to Zoroastrian. Her demeanor was professional, but not unkind, and she wasted no time explaining the situation. "You've been selected by King Vorlin's will," she said matter-of-factly. "Refusing isn't an option unless you want to start an interstellar incident. Trust me, you don't." "But why me?" Daniel asked, still struggling to grasp the enormity of it all. "I'm nobody. I don't know anything about ruling or aliens or whatever this is," Elena shrugged. "That's above my pay grade. All I know is that the king's decision is final. Now pack lightly, we leave in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Later, Daniel found himself strapped into a seat aboard the starship, gazing out the window as Earth grew smaller and smaller beneath him. The ship was unlike anything he'd ever seen, its interior sleek and futuristic, filled with glowing panels and humming machinery. Elena explained that the journey would take several hours due to the distance between Earth and Zoroastrian. Giving Daniel plenty of time to process everything. As they traveled, Daniel couldn't help but wonder about the princesses. What would they like? Would they accept him, or would they resent being handed over to a human? The thought made his stomach churn. He had read enough stories to know that royals usually look down on outsiders, especially those from less developed worlds. Still, he reminded himself that he had no choice but to face whatever lay ahead. When they finally arrived at Zoroastrian, Daniel was struck by its beauty. The planet shimmered like a jewel against the dark backdrop of space, its surface covered in sprawling cities connected by networks of floating bridges and glowing pathways. As the ship descended, he caught glimpses of towering spires and lush gardens, evidence of a society far more advanced than Earth. Upon landing, Daniel was escorted to the royal palace, where he was greeted by a sea of unfamiliar faces. Among them stood the four princesses, each radiating an aura of superiority that made him feel even more out of place. Illyria, the eldest, regarded him with cold disdain, her lips curling into a smirk. Silva, the second sister, studied him with calculating eyes, as though sizing him up for weaknesses. Kira, the third, crossed her arms and scowled, clearly unimpressed. Only Nessa, the youngest, seemed remotely curious, tilting her head slightly as she observed him. Chancellor Renner, an elderly advisor with a gentle voice, stepped forward to explain the situation. King Vorlin believed that placing his daughters under your care would teach them humility and unity, he said. It is your duty to guide them and uphold the values of our kingdom. Humility? Unity? Daniel almost laughed. If anything, the princesses looked ready to rebel against the idea. Entirely? But as he glanced at their faces again, he noticed subtle cracks in their facades, flickers of uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Daniel knew one thing for certain. His quiet, predictable life was gone forever.